So thank you all for joining our Change in Behaviour series this morning. I'm Kelly Patterson, Head of Marketing EMEA here at Blis, and I'll be doing an intro for us. This morning we'll be sharing the insights we're seeing from our data on the ever-changing consumer behaviour, and today we're looking at the pharma and beauty sectors in particular. We have Alex Wright, our Head of Insight, who will be giving an update on our consumer confidence survey study that we're running. And then Nathan Lawson, our Senior Insights Manager, will be taking over to run us through the pharma and beauty insights. Just a very small housekeeping point: with so many of us on the call, we ask if you could remain on mute throughout the session and submit any questions that you have into the chat, and we'll address those at the end. We'll be recording the session, so if you need to drop off at any point, not to worry. We'll be sending around a recording as well as the decks. So if you haven't been receiving them so far, please drop your email into the chat as well. We'll make sure that you are definitely added to the list to get those. The recording will also be featured on our website, so you can see it there at blis.com/insights. I think that's everything covered, so I'll hand over to Alex to get us started.
Right, thanks, Kelly. Let me just share my screen and we'll get cracking. So like Kelly said, hopefully my screen is now shared. Everyone can see that. Me doing my morning yoga. This consumer confidence tracker we've run now for 3 waves. 3 waves in the UK. We got the April results just back last night, so this is hot off the press. We'll be going into field with the first May dip the week after next, so just in the run up to the Friday bank holiday we're going to get in the UK. We have also just run pilot tests for Australia, Singapore and the US, so those results are in the pipeline, and we're looking to roll this out to other markets as we go. So if anyone has a particular interest in their market, we'll keep you updated on when those results are going to be coming out. Quick recap: it's a very stripped back, quick 3-question survey. We run it in a mobile ad unit. The idea is to keep respondent engagement high and the experience frictionless. So speed is what we're most interested in here. The first question: how do you feel about the UK economy? Or how do you feel about the national economy, depending on which country you're answering? And these are just the UK results. And from the February baseline, we saw a pretty rapid drop to -30, which we thought was extremely dramatic at the time, but from other surveys that are running roughly in parallel in the market from some of the big guys, whether it's Kantar, GfK, McKinsey, and some private research companies as well, we're seeing fairly similar patterns. We were just spotting it a little bit ahead of those due to the speed of getting ours in and out of field. That this has seemed to stabilise a little in the April results is some comfort, but small comfort. So while the rapid drop appears to have slowed, a very, very pessimistic outlook pervades. This is the kind of level seen in the depths of the global financial crisis 11 or 12 years ago. On to the second question: how do you feel about your household financial situation? And this is where we see quite a stark difference between the kind of the mood from a house looking out and the house looking in, if you will. So people's perception on the UK economy is very negative, but for it to be hovering so close to zero, and even in the last wave just eking into the positive territory, is a great result, and I think was probably testament to the real dramatic moves the government made to kind of shore up people's own finances, whether that was employment support, payment holidays, delays, and private business stepping in as well, so banks offering mortgage holidays and so on. And this has dropped just below the waterline there, now at -1, but to be seen so stable is a good result, even if it's underpinned by great caution. Like, people are more inclined to save than they are to spend, certainly than they are to spend on any big ticket items at the moment. But I think that is a neat segue into some of the stuff Nathan's going to talk about from a pharmaceutical and beauty side of things, because if there is economic pessimism and economic caution price sensitivity is a natural output of that, which I think is something that the beauty brands and CPG brands stocked in grocery stores, obviously there's a massive consumer crossover between the two sectors, are going to have to consider when we move out of the depth of the crisis and into the next holding pattern, really. What is the next normal going to look like for us? So over to you, Nathan. Just give me a nod when you need me to move on slides.
Great. Cheers for that, Alex. So basically, just following on from what Alex sort of talked about, which provides a really nice bit of context in terms of how consumers are thinking at the moment. We've provided a few slides looking at the pharmaceutical industry and retail segment in the UK over the last few weeks, as well as bringing in a bit about beauty audiences, so where you might be able to find them going currently in terms of the real world, where they're actually shopping whilst those outlets are actually closed. So Alex, if you want to switch slides. So basically just going to break it into two short pieces. So firstly, looking at the footfall patterns that we're seeing amongst these pharmaceutical retailers. So whilst they have a protected status over here in terms of being deemed essential retailers, they, as we'll see, aren't completely immune from the impacts that are going on around generally in retail. The real hit that we're seeing in terms of consumer going out, consumer spending. And then moving on to look at beauty audiences. So whilst these stores are closed, trying to find out, well, where are they shopping, where maybe you could intervene with a message, or whether there's relevant brands in these stores that can still be sold to consumers. So if you want to skip on. So looking at a top line level for Boots, Superdrug and Holland & Barrett over the last few weeks, what we can really see is that following as restrictions started to be imposed by the government, there was 3 successive weeks of significant double-digit footfall decline for the key players in the market. As we'll see, this mirrors a lot of what we saw in some of the other segments and some of the things that Alex has spoken through before in regards to the UK grocery segment. But there were signs of slight recovery before plateauing in footfall in the sort of start to mid-April. So we saw a significant uplift around that bank holiday weekend. So 4 days of consumers, in theory, being able to go out and engage with physical retailers. It's pretty noteworthy as well that some of this will reflect a lot of consumer sort of standoffishness, a lot of consumer restraint in terms of going out. People being a bit more objective shopping seems to be something that we've seen across a number of verticals and across a number of markets. And a lot of these retailers have also put restrictions in place as well. If anyone's gone to Holland & Barrett, limiting the amount of people to 4 in a store at any one time. And it may give us an indication of what we can expect, not just from the pharmaceutical segment, but also maybe some parallel retail segments as restrictions start to unwind and people, start to take greater care in reducing consumer contact, reducing contact with their staff. And so these footfall patterns may be indicative of what we start to see. Next slide. And as I said, this is something that we've seen across a number of verticals. So, if we look at grocery, what we can really see was that there was 17 days of successive decline starting in mid-March. So as consumers start to remove themselves physically from the market, going towards online platforms, grocery has obviously been at the forefront of this. We've seen all the different initiatives that have been going on that are really great and really stimulating consumer spend and reducing the need for consumers to go to store. But we're also seeing that from, the likes of Superdrug, bringing in essential delivery, up to 90 items via different delivery platforms like Deliveroo. What we're seeing though for grocery, which parallels Pharma to some extent, is a slight recovery and sort of plateauing of footfall. So going towards this new normal that Alex referred to. Slightly different though, we saw a sort of increase in footfall starting at the very start of April here, so a week earlier than we did for Pharma, reflecting the likely restocking of grocers, restoring some consumer confidence going to store. And actually, them trying to encourage people to go to store more because their supply chains have reached sort of maximum fulfillment. Next slide, Alex. When we look at how this footfall looks over the last few weeks, what we can really see is that whilst there was actually some recovery over the last couple of weeks, it's still significantly lower than what we'd seen even in the week prior, even in the first week where we started to see a real impact on footfall from consumers to these stores. So, it's around 50% of what it was in the week 16th to the 22nd of March. And if we, look back to the very end of February, what we find really is that the last 3 weeks of footfall are equivalent to about what we saw in 1 week at the end of February. So really, whilst there seems to be some recovery leading to a new normal, we're talking about growth on a much smaller base of numbers. And actually, consumers are still trying to stay away. Next slide. What's quite interesting, though, is when we look at the share of visitors by these different retailers, we can see that Boots have really emerged as a winner over the last couple of months. So we see that their share at the moment is about 8 points higher than it was in the first period we observed at the end of February. And trying to understand why this is, of course, they've got a large store network, maybe a balance of out of city centre stores as well, making people a bit more confident. But also we're aware that Boots have been, maintaining their media presence, whilst others have, sort of either shut it off or limited their exposure. So, buying inventory when it's cheap, and maybe the share of voice is actually feeding into, a share of visitors, which a lot of different pieces of research have alluded to can happen. And so we'll keep monitoring this and see if this actually does feed into something. Once restrictions start to ease, will this battling for share of voice actually feed into longer term gains? Next slide. And this was something that we've seen across all the different areas of retail, which is loyalty increasing. And what this really means is that consumers are shopping around far less frequently because people seem to be more objective shopping. And obviously at the moment, as the government has, encouraged people to make only essential trips, people making clearly a list before they go, making sure they know where they're going to, and trying to only go to one retailer. We're seeing this in grocery as well. People aren't shopping around. And this is really important, not just for the retailers themselves, but also the brands that are stocked in these different accounts. So, for example, if you're only available in Boots, you need to play a bigger role in trying to intervene in the consumer journey before people go to store, because people aren't shopping around as much as they were. People aren't going to Superdrug and Boots, they're going to one or other. So if there's a risk of people going to a store but you're not stocked, you need to try and intervene in the journey beforehand, before people go to store, deliver a message and actually try and drive to that relevant retailer. So it's not just about your brand, it's also about, where you're stocked and where people can buy your product. Next slide. And one of the really strong indicators for, different audiences is trying to understand, well, which types of grocery chains they engage with, because it can give us a bit of an idea about, the socio-demographic of the group, but also in terms of the products that they're going to come into contact with. So you're thinking about trying to link up consumer journeys and find the relevant audience for you to target. So, for example, if you were stocked in Boots and Waitrose, you can try and identify, well, who are these shoppers? How can I ensure that I'm getting, greater awareness with this group? And what we can find from looking at where these beauty audiences are going to in terms of the grocers is that they really over-index with these premium grocers. So the likes of Waitrose and M&S, 2 to 4 times higher than the broader population. And if we look at Holland & Barrett, we can see that nearly 2/3 of their audience are going to these premium grocers, which, makes sense given the products that they have in their store, the sort of pricing, the different things that they lean into. And so here it's trying to understand, well, if you're a grocer, what sort of profiles are matching up in terms of, where people are shopping. If you're a brand, what sort of creative can I leverage? What type of things can I tap into that might be most relevant for these audiences? Next slide. And next slide. So just the final couple of slides. So this is just thinking about it in a slightly different way. So obviously the different beauty brands, you think the likes of Lush, Body Shop, Kiehl's. Currently the stores where they're stocked are closed. Their retail stores are closed. They're not deemed essential. So basically, there's an opportunity to try and tap into these beauty audiences if you are one of the pharma retailers, if you are a grocer, you need to target them because they've got no physical outlet to actually go to. So what we've done here is taken a look at audiences seen in these beauty stores in January and February to understand, well, where are they going now? Where perhaps is seeing the greatest traction with these audiences. What we really find is that Holland & Barrett over-indexes with each of these groups, but particularly the Body Shop and L'Occitane. So you think about Holland & Barrett and Body Shop, some of the products they stock, maybe has a greater resonance with this audience. And so it's trying to think about ways in which different retailers, different brands who are stocked in these retailers can try and slot into the sort of repertoire of these audiences. So you see that Boots is significantly under-indexing. So, whilst they have greater scale, actually Holland & Barrett getting much greater cut through given their retail presence. Next slide. And finally, we can understand well what the different grocery groups that people go into, and seeing what we've seen with Holland & Barrett, it's probably unsurprising that we're also seeing these beauty audiences really over-index with the premium grocery chains. So it goes back to the whole idea that I touched on before, which is trying to link up consumer journeys, trying to ensure that if you are a Body Shop, or if you stock Body Shop products, or you stock L'Occitane products in your store, where is the greatest opportunity for targeting? If you are Waitrose, if you are M&S, which audiences have you got the greatest chance of getting traction with? Because for them, other premium beauty and Kiehl's will be more relevant than, say, perhaps looking at Lush or Body Shop, which drift, more towards the big four, more towards the discounters. Just looking to try and link up and try and find those audiences where fighting for share of voice, fighting for front of mind awareness is likely to reap the greatest rewards in terms of converting to sales elsewhere. But that is my spiel. Are there any questions?
If there's no questions, I think there's a few. Obviously, there's lots of key points in there, and I think taking it almost a step back from it and looking at the last time economic hardship really kicked in on a big scale. So going back to kind of 2009, 2010. At the moment, we're not in a recession technically, but we very soon will be, or seeing similar effects to a recession. And last time out, the lipstick effect was a phrase I'd never heard before, but really came around quite often. It's the idea that people were unwilling to give up the little luxuries and the price points of things, whether it was like a lipstick or a face cream or masks or any of those kind of soft luxuries, pamper items, were what people were unwilling to give up. And so some of these aspects that Nathan, you were talking about, whether it's the specialists like Boots, Superdrug, Holland & Barrett, where are they going to see the greatest threat come from? Is it more economically minded generalists like the grocers or even Poundland, that kind of retailer, or is it the specialists at the more luxury end, where people at the moment, as we've seen, are relatively comfortable in their household financial situation? So is there scope for the higher end retailers to capitalize on that before price sensitivity kicks in? And then also there's the aspect of, it's not just about cosmetics and the aesthetic side of things. There's going to be, I think, a real trend towards increased preoccupation with the ideas of wellness and of course hygiene as well. So be interested to see how some of the brands stock their react, and also what their relationship is with the retailers in promoting those products. So if there are no questions, or if there are, pop them in the chat or follow up with us after, and we'll catch up with you on the next one.